They say miracles happen when you've lost everything. I'm here to tell you that's a lie. What happens when you lose everything is this. You walk into the desert with a 3-month-old baby, $17 in your pocket, and the grandmother who raised you limping beside you. And you pray that whatever kills you does it quickly. My name is Elena, and the day my uncles threw us out, the temperature was dropping toward freezing. My son, Lucas, barely old enough to focus his eyes, was wrapped in the only clean blanket I owned. My grandmother Carmela clutched a battered suitcase that predated my birth, and I carried the weight of every mistake I'd ever made. "You can't do this to us," I screamed at the closing door. My Uncle Vincent didn't even look back. His brother Marcus stood on the porch like a scarecrow, wringing his hands but doing nothing. Absolutely nothing. Vincent's voice cut through the wind. "This house is ours now. Mom signed it over while she was still breathing. You brought your problems here, you and that mistake in your arms. Don't come back." The word mistake hung in the air like poison. Lucas stirred against my chest, oblivious to being called something he'd spent his whole life trying to disprove. My grandmother's hand found my shoulder. She'd worked in laundries for 40 years, and her fingers felt like dried leather. "Let's go, Mija. We don't beg for crumbs from dogs." "Where will we go?" I asked, but I already knew the answer. Nowhere. We had nowhere. The desert stretched before us like an accusation. This was New Mexico, beautiful and brutal, a place that didn't care about your story. We started walking along the cracked highway, our shadows long in the failing light. I thought about my mother. She died in that house just a year ago, wasted away by cancer while Vincent and Marcus complained about the smell of medicine. On her deathbed, she'd gripped my hand so hard, I thought my bones would snap. "Protect your grandmother," she whispered. "Your uncles aren't good men, never trust them." I'd failed. God, I'd failed her so completely. Lucas started crying, that desperate, hungry cry that tears through a mother's chest. I had 1 bottle of formula left. 1. After that, I had nothing but the milk my body refused to produce, and the certainty that my son would starve because his mother was stupid enough to trust a man who said he loved her Samuel. Even thinking his name made my stomach turn. 6 months ago, I'd sat across from him in an Albuquerque cafe, my hands shaking as I told him I was pregnant. I watched his face change, watched love evaporate like water on hot asphalt. "I can't do this," he said. "Not we. Just I." "What about us?" I'd asked, my hand instinctively covering my stomach. "There is no us. This is your problem, not mine." I chased him down the street, crying, begging. He turned to me in front of a crowd of strangers and said the words that would echo in my head forever. "That thing you're carrying is your mistake. Stay away from me." Now that mistake was crying against my chest, and I had nothing to give him. We walked for 2 hours. Carmela's breathing grew ragged. She was 78 years old, and I was killing her with every step. A truck approached. Big, dark, promising salvation. I waved frantically. The driver slowed, looked at us, and accelerated away, leaving us choking on dust. Hope is a cruel thing. It makes you believe rescue is coming when really, you're just postponing the inevitable. Darkness came fast, the way it does in the desert. The temperature plummeted. Lucas's cries turned weak, and that scared me more than when they were strong. We needed shelter. We needed a miracle. That's when I saw it. About 100 yards from the highway, hidden behind dying scrub brush, stood a structure, not a rock formation, a building, adobe, half collapsed, abandoned. But it was 4 walls and possibly a roof. "Grandmother, look." Carmela squinted into the darkness. "Looks like a house. Abandoned. Or a coffin," I muttered, but we didn't have options. The path to the house was nearly erased by time and weather. The closer we got, the clearer it became that no one had lived here in decades. Windows were boarded or broken. The door hung from a single hinge, groaning in the wind like something dying. I pushed it open. The smell hit me first: dust, decay, mouse nests, and something else. Something that felt like sadness had soaked into the walls. I used my phone's flashlight, 5% battery remaining. The beam illuminated a small living room frozen in time, furniture covered with filthy sheets, a fireplace full of cobwebs. In the kitchen, a can of coffee sat on the counter, its contents petrified into a solid mass. And in the back room, a crib. My blood went cold. The crib was wooden, handmade, covered in dust but structurally sound, as if someone had left it behind, waiting for a baby that never came back. "Who lived here?" I whispered. Carmela was staring at the walls with an expression I couldn't read. "This place. I know this place." "That's impossible. We're miles from—" "Your grandfather," she interrupted, her voice strange and distant. "Arturo. He used to talk about building a house in the desert, away from everything. He called it his refuge." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. My grandfather had died when I was 5. I barely remembered him, except for calloused hands and a sad smile. "Grandmother, people build lots of houses. This could be— Look at the fireplace," she said, pointing with a trembling finger. I looked. The brickwork was distinctive, a pattern of crosses worked into the adobe. "So? Your grandfather did that? He did that exact pattern on the shed behind our old house, before Vincent and Marcus sold it." The pieces couldn't fit. But Carmela was walking through the house like she was seeing ghosts. She touched the walls with something like reverence. Or horror. I didn't have time for mysteries. Lucas needed to be warm and fed. I cleared the ancient crib, laid him in it, and gave him the last bottle he drank like he knew it was the end of everything. We slept that night on a dust-covered sofa. At least Carmela slept. I lay awake, listening to Lucas breathe, and wondering if this was how our story ended. Frozen in an abandoned house in the middle of nowhere. But when dawn came, the sun revealed something I'd missed in the darkness. There was a well, and when I turned the rusted handle, clean water poured out. "We have water," I shouted back to the house. For the first time in 2 days, I felt something other than despair. Carmela was standing in the kitchen, her hand pressed against the wall like she was trying to hear its heart beat. "Elena," she said quietly, "we need to search this house." "Why?" "Because your grandfather was a man of secrets, and if this is what I think it is, those secrets might save us." We searched for 3 hours. We found old cans of rice and beans in the pantry, ancient but sealed. We found blankets. We found evidence of a life interrupted. Dishes in the sink, clothes in drawers sized for a woman and a child. And then I found the loose brick. It was in the fireplace, exactly where you'd miss it, unless you were looking. I pulled it free, and behind it was a hollow space. Inside the hollow was a wooden box. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside wasn't money or jewelry. It was paper. Letters tied with faded blue ribbon and a leather journal, its cover cracked with age. "Letters," I said, my disappointment crushing. "Just old letters." Carmela took them with the reverence you'd give sacred texts. Her eyes widened as she read the first envelope, "For my beloved Arturo." The room tilted. "Grandfather, but you wrote—" "I didn't write these," Carmela said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I barely know how to write my own name." I took the first letter and read aloud. "Dear Arturo, I know I shouldn't write to you. You're a married man, and I'm just the woman who cared for you when you fell ill in the fields. But I can't forget your kindness. I can't forget our conversations. I'm living in the house you built for me, the one you called our refuge, and I'm not alone. I'm carrying your child." The silence that followed could have swallowed the world. "A child," Carmela whispered. "Arturo had another child." I kept reading, The woman's name was Isabella. She'd worked in the chili fields. She and Arturo had found this abandoned land and fixed it up together, a secret place where they could talk without judgment. Something happened. Once. She got pregnant. He couldn't leave his family, but he gave her this house and promised to provide for their son. The son's name was Miguel. "This changes everything," I said. "If grandfather had another child, that child would be Vincent and Marcus's half-brother," Carmela finished, "and your mother's half-brother." The implications crashed over us like a wave. This house wasn't just shelter, it was inheritance. It was proof that Vincent and Marcus weren't the only children of Arturo Torres. Somewhere out there was a man who had as much right to our family's legacy as anyone. More than that, this house was his by birthright. We found the journal next Isabella's journal. She wrote about falling in love with Arturo's kindness, about their stolen conversations, about building this house together. She wrote about Miguel's birth, about Arturo visiting once a month with supplies and toys he'd carved himself. And then the entries stopped. The last one was desperate, written in a shaky hand. "Arturo hasn't come in 2 months. People say he's ill. Miguel has a fever. I'm taking what money remains and going east to find a doctor. God protect us." She'd fled to save her dying son, leaving everything behind, including the title deed. "The deed," I gasped, digging deeper into the box. "There's a deed here, made out, to Miguel Ramos." Carmela took it with trembling hands. "Ramos must be Isabella's name. Arturo gave his son her surname to protect him." "But why leave this behind? If you're running for your life, you take the deed. It's proof of ownership. Unless you're running so fast you don't have time to think. Unless your child is dying and nothing else matters." We sat in the dusty living room of a dead woman's house, holding the proof that nothing in our family was what we thought it was. My grandfather, the quiet, sad man I barely remembered, had built an entire second life out here in the desert. He'd loved another woman. He'd fathered another son, and that son was out there somewhere. Maybe alive, maybe dead. But legally, undeniably, this house was his. "We have to find him," I said. "We have to find Miguel." But first, we had to survive. We had water and a little food, but Lucas needed formula. I needed to get to town. Carmela gave me the $17 we had left, literally every cent to our names. I walked 8 miles to the highway, then hitched a ride with a rancher who didn't ask questions. The nearest store was another 5 miles. I bought formula, rice, beans, matches. The cashier looked at me with pity I didn't want. On the way back, carrying my supplies like treasure, I thought about Vincent and Marcus in their comfortable home. I thought about Samuel in his expensive Albuquerque apartment. They'd both discarded us like trash, but we were still standing. Barely, but standing. When I got back to the house, Carmela had started a fire in the fireplace. She'd boiled water. She'd made the place almost livable. That night, we ate warm rice and beans. Lucas drank his formula. We survived another day. But surviving wasn't enough. We needed answers. We needed to find Miguel Ramos and tell him about the house his father built. Tell him about the mother who loved him enough to run into the desert to save his life. We needed justice. 3 days later, I was in the house alone with Lucas when I heard a vehicle, not on the highway, coming across the desert, directly toward us. Panic seized me. Vincent and Marcus. They'd found us. I grabbed Lucas and hid in the bedroom, my heart threatening to explode. The vehicle stopped. Footsteps crunched on gravel. Then a knock. Not aggressive, almost polite. "Hello," a man's voice, deep, calm. "Is anyone here? I saw smoke from the chimney." I didn't answer. Could be a trick. "My name is David Salazar. I live at the ranch about 8 miles west. This house has been abandoned for 30 years. I'm just checking to make sure everything's all right. David Salazar. Not Vincent. Not Marcus. But could I trust him? I made a decision. I opened the door, still holding Lucas. The man was maybe 40, weathered by sun and work, with kind eyes that reminded me of someone. He took one look at me. Filthy, exhausted, clearly squatting in an abandoned house, and his expression softened. "Are you in trouble?" he asked simply. That's one way to put it. He listened to our story without interruption. When I finished, he said something that made my blood stop. My mother used to talk about this house. She called it the House of the Dry Cottonwood. She said a sad woman lived here once with a little boy. My voice came out as a whisper. Your mother's name. What was it? Isabella Salazar. She passed 5 years ago, but before she married my stepfather, her name was Isabella Ramos. The world tilted. And you, what was your name before? I was born Miguel Ramos. My mother changed it when we moved to Arizona. I was about 3. She married a good man who adopted me, gave me his name. I couldn't breathe, couldn't process. The man standing in front of me was the baby from the journal. The son, Arturo, had fathered in secret, my mother's half-brother. My uncle. We have something to show you, I managed. I gave him the box, watched his face change as he read his mother's words, saw the love Arturo had given them, understood the secret his mother had kept his entire life to protect him. When he looked up, there were tears in his eyes. He was my father. Arturo Torres was my father. And this house, I said, pulling out the deed, legally, it's yours. David held the document like it might disappear. Then he looked at me, at Lucas, at the house his father built. No, he said, this house saved you. It was supposed to. That's why it was still here after all these years. My father built it with love. Now it's doing what it was always meant to do, protecting family. He helped us. Over the following weeks, David became our savior. He brought supplies. He helped repair the house properly, plumbing, electricity, new windows. He heard about Vincent and Marcus, about how they'd thrown Carmela out of her own home. They're not just your uncles, he said quietly. They're my half-brothers. And from everything you've told me, they're exactly the kind of men my father described in these letters. Cold, greedy, cruel. David was a successful contractor. He knew people. He knew lawyers. Together we built a case. We proved Carmela had signed over her house under duress. We proved Vincent and Marcus had coerced an elderly woman. We proved David's legal claim to the adobe house. And when Vincent and Marcus came looking for us, when they tried to intimidate us, tried to burn us out, David was there. He called the police. He stood between us and them. The trial was devastating. Vincent was arrested for attempted arson when he actually tried to torch the house with us in it. His own brother Jorge testified against him, broken and weeping, admitting everything. Vincent got 25 years. Jorge disappeared. Carmela got her house back, but she didn't want it. Too many ghosts, too much pain. Instead, we stayed. We rebuilt the adobe house into something beautiful. David helped with everything. He moved from his empty ranch into the house his father built, filling it with the family Arturo had always wanted. And somewhere in the process of rebuilding walls and lives, David and I fell in love. Not the desperate, foolish love I'd felt for Samuel. This was different, solid, real, built on shared loss and shared strength. Lucas called him Papa. David cried the first time he heard it. We got married in the house, with Carmela officiating unofficially and Lucas toddling between us. We had a daughter next, named Isabella, after the woman who'd loved Arturo enough to carry his secret to her grave. Samuel showed up once, months later, full of regrets and empty apologies. I let him see Lucas for 5 minutes, long enough to understand what he'd thrown away. Then I sent him back to his empty life. The house stands today, solid and warm. We run a small business from it, handmade furniture, using the techniques David learned from his adoptive father, and that Arturo had probably used to build the original crib. We help other families in crisis, offering shelter and hope. Sometimes I stand outside and look at this place. People ask if I believe in miracles. Now I tell them no. I believe in survival. I believe that when everything is taken from you, you discover what you're actually made of. This house didn't save us because of magic or divine intervention. It saved us because a man loved a woman, and their son enough to build something permanent. Because that love echoed across decades. Because family, real family, isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when the door slams in your face and the desert stretches before you. Vincent will die in prison. Jorge lives with his shame somewhere we'll never know. But we're here. We're alive. We built something beautiful from abandonment and pain. The house of the dry cottonwood isn't dry anymore. We planted a tree. It's growing. So here's my question for you. When everything is stripped away, money, security, dignity, what's left? What would you build from nothing? Would you survive what we survived? Tell me honestly in the comments, because I need to know if strength like ours is rare or if it's hiding in everyone, waiting for the moment when walking into the desert is your only choice.